My name is Diana. I was born in Virginia, like Virginia Beach, Virginia. I grew up in Virginia, so I didn't move to the, I kind of spent most of my, I guess, childhood and young adult years on the East Coast. And I did not move to California until I was in my 20s.
Okay, got it.
Which generation are you?
I've heard some people say that first generation is the first generation born here. And then other people say first generation is the generation that moved here, that immigrated here. So I'm not sure. It depends on how you define that. I was born in the States. My parents were not. So does that make me first generation or second?
How about your parents?
My parents are very strict. I never got to really go out with friends or anything like that. I mean, I think as like a kid, they would like walk with us to the playground, to our park, I think we were like pretty sheltered. Like my mom was kind of like definitely the tiger mom. And my parents, had this sounds so stereotypical, but they had a restaurant. So me and my brother were restaurant kids. Like we grew up in the restaurant. As soon as we got off of school, got home from school, we were like taken to the restaurant where we were doing homework there. We would we spent our lives like at the restaurant, I think.
Did you grow up with a lot of Asians?
There were not a lot of Asians in that area. Well, okay, there was. There were not other Chinese at all. Like, I think I knew like 2 or 3 other families like growing up that was in the general area, not just in the city, but like just in the general area that like my parents would know. I don't know how they know them. But my school, elementary and junior high, was mostly white. So it was definitely, I was definitely the minority, okay? However, I guess they built a new school and it kind of pulled from a different area for high school. So my high school was really diverse. And I think that's what kind of like also shaped me, because in the latter childhood years, as a preteen and like a teenager, I was just kind of around a whole different group. And I kind of developed this appreciation for other cultures besides white. So like the Asians that I knew growing up were like Filipinos, So sometimes I say I'm Filipino adjacent just because like I knew about the food, the parties, the aunties and uncles, And so, but like my high school was probably like 15% Filipino.
What did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I think that changed a couple of times. For some reason, I wanted to be a teacher at first. And then I guess I discovered my love of dancing, and then I wanted to be a choreographer. I wanted to be a choreographer and a dancer, and that's actually what ultimately brought me to LA.
What did your parents want you to do?
Oh, definitely none of those things. They were like, a teacher doesn't make good money, But I bet you, like, once I told them my next thing, they're like, a teacher ain't so bad. So, yeah.
Has being Asian helped or hurt your pursuit of dance?
Oh, that's actually an interesting question. I think it did not help in some ways, but I also think it helped in other ways. So, LA is very diverse. But what I mean by help or hurt is, I think sometimes, actually, especially like a decade or more ago, before like America's Best Dance Crew, before all these like great Asian dance crews or came out, I think the initial stereotype from like 20 years ago was like, oh, Asians can't dance, they don't have rhythm, they blah blah, right? They're still like the token Asian. I remember going to an audition one time and a whole group of people. And then it kind of came down to the final few, right? And then they kept calling. I noticed that towards the end, like through multiple, we did the routine, and then they cut more people, did the routine. During the final couple of times, they kept calling me and this other Asian girl back in and have us do the routine at the same time. And then they had us do it again. What I realized was going on was that they can't have two Asian girls on their team. Even though we were both good, they're like, that's just too many Asian girls. We have to have that one token Asian girl. So in a way, it's like, well, if we're both good, why can't you take both of us?
When people ask, what are you? How do you answer?
It kind of depends on the context. If somebody asks me to self-describe, like on paper, like before when I applied to gigs or whatever, I usually just say Asian American. They just need to know I'm Asian. They don't need to know specifics. Usually, if I meet people in person, like in a social setting, and they'll ask me, what am I, or where you're from, or whatever it is, those questions, it's very apparent that they're asking, or sometimes people will be like, what type of Asian are you? When they're that specific, I usually make them guess, because I've heard that, I'm kind of ambiguous as far as like, which ethnicity. And I get all sorts of answers, and I don't mind. I think it's very interesting. But I then finally tell them, I'm Chinese American. When you're like a kid, you don't know the difference between Asian, Chinese, Chinese American, Asian American. So I think I just, as a kid, said that. But growing into it, I think I identify as an Asian American. I think I use that term because it's very inclusive. I think looking at me, a lot of people can't tell that I'm Chinese. So, I feel like it's just more inclusive to be Asian American. And on top of that, being that, for example, I feel like I can identify with more than one Asian culture, especially since growing up, I had a lot of friends that were Filipino. I feel like it just better describes me.
Do you speak your heritage's language?
I used to, I'm still kind of fluent, but it's really true that if you don't use it, you lose it. I remember my parents telling me and my brother all the time when we were kids, like, speak to each other in Chinese, you're gonna forget it. And sure enough, I don't really have friends that I speak with in, Cantonese, which is, I guess, when my parents spoke at home.
Which U.S. state has the largest majority of Asian Americans?
U.S. state? I'm going to assume that it's one of the ones in the major cities. I don't know. My guess is either California or New York or something like that.
Answer is Hawaii.
Oh, you know what? I totally didn't even think about that. Yes, because almost everybody is like mixed Asian there.
How are Asians with other Asians?
I think that a lot of people, not just Asians in general, but a lot of people, but Asians also, tend to self-segregate. And they're like, oh, well, these are the Koreans, and these are Chinese, and these are Japanese, and that's Filipino, and blah, blah, and they're not the same, and they're not us, and blah, blah. There is a lot of racism in the older generation, It's like, oh, they're not good enough because they're not Chinese, or they're not good enough because they're not Korean, or, whatever it is.
Why did Stop Asian Hate get less attention and support?
I think that why it didn't receive as much, media and attention, I think, again, I'm stereotyping, okay? There's definitely Asians that are vocal. Asians in general are less vocal. Just like with ICE, they're capturing plenty of Asian people, that's not in what's in the majority of the forefront of our media.
What can we do to better support one another?
I actually think that the younger generation does a pretty good job of just kind of being inclusive and being friends with other cultures. I think the more we interact and learn about other cultures, the more accepting we are. I personally have friends of like all different races and cultures and ethnicities. So I don't know, maybe I'm too hopeful, but I mean, I feel like it's becoming less of an issue.
Your role model growing up?
I mean, because I wanted to pursue dance and choreography, I mean, role model, I don't know if I would not use the term role model, okay? But my idol was Janet Jackson.
How about an Asian American role model?
I did not, because they weren't out there growing up. Like, how can I have them as a role model?
If you could sit down with any Asian American, who would it be?
Andrew Yang. Oh, the fact that you don't know him. He ran for president in 2020. For example, like some Asians don't even know about Andrew Yang, right? And it's like, so if it doesn't even start with that, how can we kind of expect other people to pay attention when we're not paying attention to our own? You know, politicians are people who are trying to give people a voice and representation.
Experience any other Asian racism?
But in Virginia, yeah, I definitely, as a kid, I just remember people would be like me and like my family as a kid would be out, and you know, my parents are speaking Chinese to us, and random people would be like, speak English, you're in America, you know, things like that.
What's your version of the American dream?
I don't know if I have an American dream. I have hopes for myself, you know, which is to feel belong, like loved, you know, to feel comfortable physically, emotionally, mentally.
Are things improving for Asian Americans?
I feel like in the recent years there's been a regression. Stereotypes more are happening. We've kind of been pitted against each other, pointing fingers at like, it's their fault, it's their fault, it's their fault. And that's not the way to move forward. I think we all kind of need to find the similarities rather than the differences. I don't know, like just don't let people divide us